All right, what's going on, everybody? I'm with my old pal Calix Boxing, and we've been kind of going back and forth here. He's doing his little victory lap. I got to give him props. He smashed his decision prop with the 450. Hats off to him, man. Um,
Do you think I was shaking in my boots in the last couple in the championship rounds? Do you think I was
well,
like,
you said you weren't. You said you weren't. So I
hey,
got to take.
I was in my jacuzzi and I was still cool as a cucumber, cool as Fonzie, just watching it.
I'd love to strap up a polygraph and ask you that question, but I don't know. But here's the thing, and I've been pretty consistent on this, right? A lot of people hate holding. I understand it's part of the sport, and I've always said it's the fighter's job to have to deal with the holding and fight his way out of the clinches, and make the adjustments to deal with the holding. Right. What I felt was an issue in this fight was, yes, with no question, Benavidez did start out slow.
Oh yeah.
There's no question about that. I thought he was starting to pick it up a little bit in the third. One thing that bothered me was when he was trying to wiggle out of the clinch, force his way out of the clinch, fight his way out of the clinch, right? Kenny Bayless said to him, as if he can't, fighters always give you that little, like Tyson Fury, for instance, when he knocked out Dillian White. He gave him that little nudge, created that space, and he shot the punch. So Benavidez was trying to fight his way out of the clinch. He's trying to give him that little bump, knock him off balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Kenny Bayless wasn't allowing him to do that. And then he follows him back to the round and continues to chastise him with, and then he goes, oh, don't trash talk either. Meanwhile, they're both trash talking back and forth, right? Now, would Benavidez have stopped playing if it wasn't for Kenny Bayless? I'm not saying that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible he would have fought differently if he wasn't being chastised so much about trying to wrestle his way out of the clinches? But if you notice what he did start doing, right? I would say around the fourth, toward the end of the fourth, beginning of the fifth. I would say around the fourth and fifth round, he started doing this, right? So when Plant started to come in and grab him, what Benavidez did, if you noticed, is he kind of lifted his arms up, put his left hand on Plant's shoulder, and he came over the top with that clubbing Foreman type right hand, right?
Yeah.
So he had to make that adjustment because he wasn't going to be allowed to, give that little shrug, right? So what did he do? He had to make the adjustment. I'm going to lift up my arms like this, go like this, and just turn them turn the right hand over the top like that. So he had to get a little creative. Now my argument is, if he was allowed to kind of give the nudge, could he have done that? Could he have done his shoe shine flurries and come straight down the pike with his right hand? So, this fight's a little different in terms of Plant's tactics because with Canelo's shorter. It's harder to reach out and grab the shorter guy. Canelo kind of lays back a little bit. He's not coming forward. He can sometimes be susceptible to jabs. A lot of times he'll let you throw the jab. He'll catch it. But sometimes a few of them get through. He's not really concerned because he's biding his time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with this, you got that long body. He's coming forward at you. Even though he's, catching shots, whatever, right? You can still reach out and grab him because he's tall. So Benavidez had to make the adjustment. So my whole argument is this. This is the bone I have to pick with you because you've been calling out Kenny Bayless for years, right?
Yeah.
For years. Now all of a sudden in this fight, you're giving him a pass.
I'm not giving him a pass. I'm not giving him a pass.
You don't think he had any impact on this fight? You don't think he forced Benavidez to have? Well, no, I'm not going to say forced. You don't think he was part of the reason why Benavidez had to make the adjustment like he did in the second half of the fight?
There's no doubt, and I'm not giving him a pass. Here's how I would explain, and you're absolutely correct. Kenny Bayless has been awful for a while. There's a reason that Floyd Mayweather's last 12 fights, half of them were with Kenny Bayless. In particular, the second Maidana fight. If you go back and watch the second Maidana fight, Bayless was atrocious. And he became known as, Mayweather's bodyguard, right? And that was the weird thing about going in this fight is you would think that the PBC would be trying to build up Benavidez as much as possible for the Canelo shot, right? 22-foot ring, Kenny Bayless. So I'm seeing this last week and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like, it seems like they're trying to make it more difficult for Benavidez to get the stoppage, right? 22-foot ring and Kenny Bayless. But you know what I've seen in the past? I've seen this with my very own eyes. I've seen Kenny Bayless as a referee and guys laying on the canvas looking up at Kenny Bayless. I've also seen guys fighting 22-foot rings, Billy Joe Saunders, and either get stopped, get knocked out. I've seen it. And that's my thing. Kenny Bayless was atrocious. Everything else was good about this fight, right? Benavidez looked good. Plant's a good fighter. It was a good fight. It was a good crowd. It was a good atmosphere. It was a good environment. It was good buzz. And the judges were good. That's the crazy thing about it too, right? It was a good pay-per-view. The undercard was good. That was the word of the night. Everything was good except Kenny Bayless. He was atrocious as he always is. But here's what I wanted to see. And this is why I don't give Benavidez a pass for not getting the stoppage, is to me, special fighters, even great fighters, still get the stoppage there. Especially if you're seen as the Mexican monster. This is what people have built up, the expectations, right? And in doing that, they've done that for a reason, right? Is they've got to build up fighters in and around 168 because they want to push the narrative. This is the Canelo detractors I'm talking about, that Canelo is ducking multiple fighters simultaneously, that he's got, if he goes this way, he's ducking a guy over here. If he does, they do that thing. So constant goalpost moving. But if you're the Mexican monster that you've been built up to be, to me, you don't throw 32 punches per round. If you're a special pressure fighter, you don't throw 32 punches per round in the first half of that fight. And on top of that, he averaged 45 punches per round throughout the fight. He went into the fight at 67 punches per round. Now, to your point, high percentage. His percentages were right around where they normally are, right? And to your point, he showed he's a good defensive fighter too, because Plant was not landing much, right? So that's what I took from this fight is Benavidez showed layers, right? He showed that he's a versatile fighter who can win a decision against a good fighter. He's not just a knockout artist, right? He can win a decision against a good fighter. So he showed some versatility there. But what he did not show is that he's an insurmountable guy who's just going to come in there and blow people away, walk them down. He did not show that he's a special fighter, pressure fighter. Great pressure fighters, I just don't see them throwing as little as 32 punches per round for half of the fight. And I understand Caleb Plant's a great fighter for the first half of the fight, much like Zab Judah, right? After the sixth round, they fall off significantly. Caleb Plant, 1 through 6, much different fighter than 7 through 12. And it showed in this fight, and it showed in the Canelo fight. But once again, if you go back and watch Canelo in round 11 of Caleb Plant, he was not allowing himself to be clinched. It just didn't happen. He's fighting the same fighter. And to your point, I mean, I understand he's shorter and all this stuff. I saw it with Lomachenko when he's fought certain guys. Pacquiao, when he fought Hatton, Pacquiao was not allowing Hatton to hold him. He was not allowing him to do it. Special fighters can get out of that. A Kambosos can't get out of being clinched constantly by Devin Haney. He can't. Linares was able to get out of those clinches because he's a good technical fighter, but he wasn't able to capitalize on it later on in the fight, although he got close. But to me, great fighters get out of that. And Benavidez fell short of looking like a great fighter on Saturday night. He did not look like a monster to me. He did not. He did not look like a special pressure fighter. And that's why I can't, although Kenny Bayless was atrocious, to your point, I can't let Benavidez off the hook by using him as the scapegoat as to why it didn't happen. Because there are still other adjustments he could have made. And if he puts more in the bank earlier on. If he, instead of 32 a round, it's closer to 50, he gets the stoppage. He gets it.
Well, here's my question. Does he have to be that pressure fighter? Can he be more than that? Can he do other things? He can he box? He was that pressure fighter in rounds 9, 10, 11, and 12.
10 especially. Good Lord.
Right? Land
Yeah.
43 points. Like he look you don't think he looked like a monster in those rounds?
Yeah, but in flashes. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't, it depends on what your expectations of the fighter are, right? And that's my point. Expectations is a key word. We expect certain things of Canelo because we see him as, even his detractors, even his haters, they expect him to fight Ryder, then Bivol, then Benavidez for a reason. They're not going to be honest about what that reason is, but the reason is they expect greatness from him because they've seen that he's a great fighter. They're not going to admit that, but that's what it is. Benavidez, we're not expecting great things of him because to us, he looks like a good fighter. I think level-headed people up to this point, he looks like a good fighter. Benavidez, in order to beat Canelo, who are the guys who have given Canelo issues in the past? Just take a stab at it.
I would say
like
guys
the stylistically.
I would say the guys who fight well on the outside and can beat them with the jab and stuff.
Like Mayweather,
Yeah.
Bivol. Those are two
Yeah.
special, versatile fighters. Like we've talked about this, you and I, is if you look at CompuBox, Bivol is the most versatile fighter in the sport statistically. Mayweather was when he was there. Versatile fighters who can move and do different things, give you different looks. Those are the guys that are going to get Canelo more issues, right? Even Golovkin through the first 24 rounds. You could argue Golovkin definitely won one, possibly won the second one. Golovkin's not just a pressure fighter. He can give you the jab out of the peekaboo style. He can give you the up jab. He can give it to you offensively, defensively. He can fight off the back foot, front foot. He can give you different looks, right? The guys who do not give Canelo problems, and in fact, Canelo would rather fight these guys, is pressure fighters who are going to be there for him to find, particularly pressure fighters who are bigger, because they're easier for him to find. He can go to the body, right? Angulo, Kirkland, these guys gave Canelo no issues. And Benavidez is the type of pressure fighter. He's more slow plotting, and he's more direct lines, right? And the punches are a little more telegraphic. So this narrative that's being built up that Benavidez is Canelo's boogeyman, I've never understood it because he's not the guy that would be that guy, right? Bivol's the boogeyman for him. And that's the thing, like, they want to make it out to where Canelo is avoiding a boogeyman, yet he fought his boogeyman last May, and he's fighting him again in September. So if there's a guy to avoid, it's Bivol. Like, well, if I'm in Canelo's inner circle, I'm telling you, you don't have to circle back to that. Like Mosley did that a couple of times, right? He had two guys. He lost two twice. And they were probably telling us not a good idea, dude. Like, it's not a good idea to fight this fight. And if I'm in Canelo's inner corner, I'm telling him, go to Benavidez. Fight that one in September. Leave Bivol alone. That's the advice I would be giving him if I wanted a bigger fight. Benavidez is the bigger fight, and it's easier to win for Canelo. But you're not going to talk the alpha male out of circling back to that. I saw it in Canelo's face after he lost to Bivol. What's the first thing he said? It can't end this way, right? Yeah. He's not going to let it go. He's like Kobe, like Jordan. He's not. If somebody gets the best of, he's not going to let that go. He's not going to let it go. But to answer your question, I know I kind of went around a little bit. Is
go ahead.
Yes, it's good to see versatility for Benavidez, but that would work against a Caleb Plant. It would work against a Charlo. It would work against a Boo Boo Andre. But when you're talking about the tippy top stylistically in a special fighter, it's going to take a special – if a pressure fighter is going to beat Canelo, it's got to take a special pressure fighter who can do it for all 12 rounds, because you're not going to knock Canelo out. So you have to just overwhelm him with punches, in that if you're just a pressure fighter, in that you're going to win a scorecard just off of aggression, because you're not going to knock him out. I just see no evidence of Benavidez would be able to knock Canelo out. And if we're going to go off of versatility, can Benavidez beat Canelo off of versatility? I don't really see that either, because I don't think he's more versatile I mean, is he a more versatile fighter than an Erislandy Lara, Austin Trout? I don't know, possibly.
I would
But,
say
but I
yes.
think I think his pathway to victory is very narrow when it comes to Canelo. Bivol is wide. Bivol, you can drive a freight train through it. It's wide. And I just tend to think that if he fights Bivol 10 times, he'll lose 9 out of 10. That's just my opinion. But Benavidez, I think it's going to be tough sledding stylistically. But I'll say this as well. I don't care if fighters win or lose as long as they're fighting top competition. There's a reason I'm a Caleb Plant fan now, although he's limited. He's shown that, and he's just a good fighter, not a great fighter. He's fought one, he's fought number 2, he fought number 7 in Durrell. He's fighting consistently great competition now. I have a track record of that. I don't care if guys lose multiple fights as long as they're giving the boxing fans what they want. I'm a fan, and that's why I became a fan of. I didn't roll out of bed wanting to like a dude, a redheaded Mexican dude who kicks boy bands out of Sweet 16 parties and rides white horses on the beach. Like, that's not something I want to do. But consistently over a decade plus, he's given me the fights that I want. It may not always be the next one, right? But within 12 to 18 months, he's going to give. If a fight is in demand, he's going to give it to you. Golovkin was in demand when he was the middleweight champion, right? Cotto passed on it. My guy Cotto. And look how I can call out my favorite fighters, right? Cotto passed on it. Sergio Martinez passed on it before that. Canelo got around to it. It took about 16, 18 months, but he got it. And then he fought it again. And then he fought it again. So to the Benavidez super fan extremists and the Canelo detractors, what I would tell you is just relax, because you're going to get the fight. Benavidez has done the bare minimum to earn the fight. I don't need him to fight anybody else. I'm there already. I'm sold. He's got it.
Well, here's where I got to disagree with you. Just like I tried to tell you about Fury about 12 years ago, I'm going to tell you about Benavidez.
Mm-hmm.
Benavidez, I think he's exceptionally fast on his feet and with his hands, right? I think he's exceptionally versatile with his punch selection when he throws those shoe shine combinations, and then he sneaks in the power shot, in between those little flurries, right? I've seen Benavidez box against Karan Davis when he couldn't get the guy out of there, and I've seen him fight him from the outside and box. Plant was supposed to be the more skilled guy here, but he was beaten every statistical category in this fight. He was out jabbed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plant landed less punches against Benavidez than he landed against Canelo. I'm going to be honest, Alex, and you could disagree if you want. This was a very similar fight, right? In a way, I'm not going to say it was the same. It was very similar than the Canelo fight because Canelo did, like, he was losing rounds early too, just like you could argue Benavidez was. And you take away that 11th round, and he wasn't really doing that much to Plant, if I'm being honest, right? And that's not to take anything away from Canelo. Maybe that was the plan all along. I know once I land this shot, it's going to be over, right? So I had Benavidez losing 3 rounds. Now, you could argue it was 4. Some people say 5. I don't know.
4.
I mean, I think, in my opinion, I think the third round and round 6 through 12 were clear Benavidez rounds.
6 through 12 was a sweep for me. Benavidez 6 through 12.
All 3 judges gave 6 through 12. And the one judge gave Plant all 5. Now, I had Plant winning rounds late in that Canelo fight. Like, I had him winning like 8 and 9. 2 judges had him winning 8 and 9. Like, one judge had him winning 8 and 9. You could even argue he won 7. So what I'm trying to say here is, I think I see something different in Benavidez. I think his foot speed and his hand speed are exceptionally quick. He looked a lot faster. I would say faster. He looked faster to me than Plant did, right? He was, and like I said on Thursday, I said, yeah, Plant probably has an advantage from the distance, right? He's a better outboxer, right? But I also said, when Benavidez collapses the pocket, that's where the separation becomes significant. So if you look at the first 6 rounds, I think you can go 4-2, even 3-3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when there was space, Plant had the edge, but it wasn't miles apart, right? But when Benavidez collapsed the pocket from round 6 through 12, it wasn't even a contest. That's why you had people say the rounds Benavidez won were, he won them decisively more clearly than the rounds Plant won.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I think. This is another factor you got to look at. Canelo's been a pro for 18 years, right? He's got miles on him. He's had some injuries. He's got some wear and tear on the knee. He's got the issues with the wrist, right? The longer they wait to fight Benavidez, in my opinion, the worse it is, because I still think Benavidez will get better. I mean, he showed you some things in this fight that you weren't used to seeing. His defense was really good in this fight, in my opinion, really good.
Well, that shows up in the numbers, and I would think, to me, it's not because he's technically a great defensive fighter, but that doesn't matter. I've done videos on that too. Is sometimes pressure fighters are better defensive fighters because of the pressure that they're applying, and then the opponent becomes gun shy. And D-Star said it a while back, and he was quoting somebody else, is the best defensive fighters are guys who are going to stop you early because you're not landing any punches on them after you're looking up on the canvas. So a lot of times we get too buried into technical. Does this fighter look great technically? We got to look at the numbers, and the numbers said in this fight, Benavidez was a good defensive fighter. That's true.
I think what goes unnoticed, and I'm just seeing these little nuances, just like I saw them with Fury. I'm seeing these with Benavidez. You got to watch when Benavidez comes forward. You got to see how he's constantly catching, picking. Like his hand positioning is really good, and the way he knocks shots down. When he knocks shots down, and he creates that opening because he's parrying the shot and he's pulling your arms down and he's catching. He actually showed head movement. He's not just walking in. Like people compare him to Margarito. No, he's not just walking in. He's catching, slipping shots as he's coming in, right? So, I just think it's different. And you mentioned Bivol. And again, Bivol, I thought Bivol, he beat Canelo, right? But when you look at some of those early rounds, like that 7-5 scorecard is not looking ridiculous to me, because I'll tell you why. When you look at the first 4 rounds, I had Canelo winning rounds 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. My co-host Eric had him winning rounds 1 and 2. Everyone had Canelo winning round 9, right? So most people gave Canelo 2 of the first 4, and they gave him round 9. But here's the problem. Everybody had that first 4 differently. Some people had 1 and 3. Some people had, 1 and 4. Some people had 2 and 3. So it's not a stretch to say that Canelo won 5 rounds in that fight, my opinion. So styles make fights, right? And I like Bivol, don't get me wrong. But he only landed 13 punches around against, he wasn't landing a lot of shots. Like, the more I think of that fight, he clearly won the fight, no question. He fought a beautiful fight. But the more I look at that fight and think about that fight, even though I had it 9-3, it was still, it wasn't a slam dunk, in other words. Like, that fight was still on the table for Canelo, I think. But later in the fight, he kind of, he just couldn't deal with Bivol. But 7-5 is not like ridiculous if you look at the first 4 rounds, and wasn't really much going on there, right?
Yeah.
So for me in this fight, I'll tell you why I think Canelo is a good style matchup for Benavidez, and he won't have the same problems that he had with Plant. Because first of all, Canelo's is not gonna reach out and grab him, right? Mm-hmm. He's not gonna reach out and grab him. Canelo doesn't throw as many punches as Plant, doesn't throw as many jabs as Plant, right? So if Benavidez is coming forward, right, and he doesn't have to worry about the jab as much. Then, in this fight with Canelo, I think you'll see more of an outside game from Benavidez, like the Caron Davis fight. I think you'll see a lot more jabs in this fight. I think he knows he's going to have to be extra busy with the jab in this fight. Now, can he do the same thing that Bivol did? No. Can he do it a little bit in spots? Possibly, because I've seen Benavidez box from the outside against Caron Davis. Now, if he gets close, again, Canelo's going to have to reach up with that hook. Benavidez is good at catching shots, and Canelo sometimes can get hit with uppercuts because he likes to kind of lunge in a little bit. Benavidez has a good uppercut. I think this fight does present challenges for Canelo because, again, if you're throwing 40 punches around and you're only landing 10 or 11 of them, like you did against Golovkin, and you don't get the guy out of there, and even if he does throw 46 or 54 punches around, but he's landing 18 of them, it becomes a numbers game at that point. Is it inconceivable for you to see Benavidez getting a decision against Canelo if Canelo doesn't knock him out?
No.
Is that impossible?
No, I said it on my podcast earlier. I would put it odds-wise, I would put it somewhere between Canelo 60-40 or 65-35, somewhere in that range. And the reason I say that is, and the reason I hate doing this is people are going to start to say, oh, you're making excuses early. It's not what it is. It's the natural process in boxing. The reason the middleweight division is unhealthy right now, why? You've got a 41-year-old dude who's clearly past it, who can say right now, even though he just vacated the 2 belts, that I'm still the best middleweight. And that's unhealthy. You shouldn't have that in boxing, especially in a sexy division like that. A healthy division is one in which you have a kingpin, and that kingpin may have it for a while, right? And then it gets to the point where he's slowing down a little bit. One of the issues that boxing fans have is they think that these fighters are in their prime longer than they are. Your prime years are what? 3, 4 maybe, and they're generally in your 20s. These fight fans think that dudes in their 30s are in their prime, and they're not. So you got a fighter in Canelo who's clearly past his prime. I try to break down big fights with one word, and like I said, Saturday night, the word was good. After Canelo versus Golovkin 3, the word was age. Golovkin clearly looked his age, and to me, and maybe the injury had something to do with it, but Canelo looked like he was showing wear and tear, correct?
That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say, Alex.
I hate to bring it up because the dudes, they're just so, God, they're constant. And they'll come to me and say, oh, you're trying to make, it's not an excuse. This is the healthy part of it. You want a guy like Benavidez to win his fight and work his way up. And now he's clearly number 2. And you're going to see if the dude in his prime, the young lion, will pick off the dude that's been there for a while.
That's what I'm saying,
And that's the wild card to me is,
okay,
this is time. This is the natural process, right? In nature is, we've seen this throughout boxing. The young guy is going to come up and he's going to take the throne. So it wouldn't be shocking at all to me. I just think stylistically, he has a much narrower path than other guys that Canelo has fought and willingly fought. One guy 3 times. One guy about to fight twice. One guy he fought before when he was 22, 23 years old in Mayweather. He's willingly fought these guys. So this narrative that this dude is ducking a guy who has a style that he's never had an issue with. He's never had an issue fighting bigger fighters. He's never had an issue fighting. Bivol didn't beat him because he was a bigger fighter. You've talked about that. Bivol beat him because he's Bivol, right? He didn't beat him because he's a bigger fighter. He just beat him because he was the better fighter at this time. But another narrative that I want to pick off here is, you talked about it's worse for Canelo if he waits. Exactly. So I don't understand why the narrative that the goalposts constantly move, right? Like he's got to fight him in September or it's a duck. Well, why wouldn't you want him to wait? If it's better for Benavidez and you want to see Canelo lose, why not let him wait till next February or May after another tough fight with Bivol? This is the stuff that drives me nuts. Another one that drives me nuts is Canelo's holding up undisputed. He's not holding up anything. He didn't exercise the immediate rematch. Bivol can go wherever he would like. Bivol could have fought Beterbiev last year. He could fight Beterbiev again in June. Nobody is holding that up. They could have fought each other multiple times over by now. But instead, they insert Yard. Then they tried to insert Buatsi. Then they insert Zerto.
Yeah.
And now they're going to insert whoever. It's a constant thing, these narratives. He's not holding up undisputed. And then somebody asked me earlier, if he were to beat Bivol, who would he fight? Who would people be calling for him to fight next? And I already know what it's going to be. If he doesn't fight Beterbiev at 175, he doesn't want the undisputed fight. He's ducking the Russian monster. Or if he fights the Russian monster, he's ducking the Mexican monster at 168. And this is what I go back to with expectations, the word expectations. We've come to expect that Canelo is going to fight the number 4 guy in the division, John Ryder. And that's seen as, that's seen as what it is. Now John Ryder's a bum. He's the only super middleweight with 2 top 10 wins at super middleweight in 2022, but he's bum. Whatever. But then he's going to fight Ryder, Bivol, then he's expected to fight Benavidez next. And if you were to win those fights, you would expect him to fight Beterbiev after that, and it would just be an afterthought. He's supposed to fight those fights, right? It's just because our expectations are higher. But we got to be honest about that. And the goalposts constantly move. Like I'm seeing people in the chat say Canelo's not a puncher at 168.
Oh,
When is he decision the guy? When is he decision?
No, he's a puncher at He's a puncher at 168. The benefit he has at 168 too is, and this is where I think Benavidez will kind of make a change.
He enjoys fighting taller fighters.
Well, these guys, he's had faster hands than a lot of these guys, in my opinion. And people say Billy Joe Saunders was quick, but I think Canelo. Here's the challenge, though. I think I would argue Benavidez has quicker hands than Canelo, and that's debatable, but I just think he does. So I guess my question is this, though, because you and I both didn't think Canelo was going to stop Golovkin in the 3rd fight. We thought it was going to be a decision fight. I think we were both on the same page. We both said that. But most people thought he was going to stop him. It was, number one, I'm going to ask this is a 2-part question. Was it a letdown that he didn't stop Golovkin? And number 2, because I saw it was a good performance from Canelo. I liked how he was throwing his jab and everything. It was a good performance, but I did notice he slowed down a bit, even for him with the volume. So that version of Canelo versus this version of Benavidez that we saw against Plant, right? Mm-hmm. How does that fight play out? Because I like Benavidez' chances. That Benavidez that we saw Saturday against that Canelo that I saw against Golovkin. Before you answer that, before you answer that, let me just bang out these 2 super chats real quick. Omar Rodriguez, thank you so much. $4.99. He says, with regard to the title of the show, the answer is an obvious yes. My question, was it intentional? I don't know, you have to ask Calix. I think him and Kenny were on the line before the fight, but all right. All right. Paul, did Benavidez look like a monster, or did he just look like a good fighter? Does that version of Benavidez beat Canelo?
Ties into what we're talking about.
Okay. I would say from rounds 9 through 12, he did look like a monster. But to Calix's point, he's got to look like a monster for more than 4 rounds against Canelo, probably. I think that's a fair assessment on Calix's part. Does that version of Benavidez beat Canelo? I think it's possible, but if you're on the other side of that, you have an argument too. This is not a slam dunk. Calix thinks it's a 60-40 fight. I think it's maybe 55-45. I would even go 50-50 based upon how he looks against Ryder. But most people would agree with Calix. I think Calix's assessment is probably the general consensus. I'm sorry, Calix. Go ahead now.
Well, and what was your first question? I forgot that one.
First question was it a letdown that he didn't stop Golovkin?
No.
And how does that version of Canelo match up with this version of Benavidez? Is there a path to victory when you see those 2 fighters?
Yeah, so to answer you first, no. Emphatically no, because
it's hard. It's hard to knock out Golovkin. Golovkin is a very, very gritty guy.
I don't think he'll ever get knocked out. I mean, I think he can fight till 45 years old. But and by the way, I'd like to see Golovkin retire, by the way. And I said
Of
that right after
course.
that fight.
Of course.
Especially if you're vacating belts. But it's tough to say where Canelo's at right now if you take everything into account, because I thought the 11-month undisputed run at 168 is being undervalued. I thought he looked great there. Caleb Plant, as we saw in the Benavidez fight, he can be cagey, he can be clever, he picks his spots early on. And, you know, to sort of push back on what was said earlier too, is it wasn't surprising to me to see Plant win rounds. And we talked about that before the fight on the roundtable against Canelo, because Canelo has shown that he's economical, right? Like Tank, he'll just be economical, and then he'll start to ratchet up things, sit on his punches more, time you more in the middle rounds, right? So it doesn't surprise me to see Canelo's numbers stay the same there. But that's the thing, is you look at, if he fights this guy or if he fights this guy that's a little further down, John Ryder or Yildirim or Plant, the numbers pretty much tell the same story of the same fighter. And that's the red flag to me. That's a shocking thing to me from Saturday night, and why I say he looks like a good fighter. I don't think he's a monster. Is when I see that number drop from 67 to 45, when I see that number drop consistently throughout the first half of the fight to 32, and it's the same thing I said about Plant coming into this fight, is going into the Canelo fight, he was a guy who his opponents were landing 5 total punches per round against him. And I think it was like, or 5 power punches per round against him. I think it was like 7 total. Those numbers doubled against Canelo. So what it showed was, and then it showed against Benavidez, is those numbers are closer to the truth than what was happening before that, when he was fighting guys like Truex. When I see Benavidez step up drastically for the first time in his career, and those numbers drop significantly like that, and you're going to land at the higher percentage when you're throwing less punches, by the way.
Sometimes.
And like I said, I got to give him credit for versatility, because some of his numbers got better defensively. In a bigger fight, they got better. Bivol is a guy who, he looked like he was in third gear throughout his career, and then he faces Canelo and he fights up to his level of competition. Zerto, his numbers get even better. So you say, okay, this guy is who he is at this point. I don't know who Benavidez is. I know he's not a monster. That's what I'm seeing right now. I know that definitively right now. He could still shock me, but
he will.
I don't really know. There's a lot of question marks. And with Canelo too, because against Golovkin, he looked a little shop worn, but how much of that is the injury and saying, look, Golovkin's not doing anything in here, I'm just close to a victory. And then Bivol is Bivol. How much do we read into that? And then you got the undisputed run the year before that. There's a lot of question marks, but I keep going back to 60-40. I just think Canelo has a 60-40 shot, 65-35 shot of beating Benavidez, because stylistically, I think this is a good matchup for Canelo overall. And there's some things that Benavidez can take advantage of, but it wouldn't shock me to see Benavidez win. It might even be better for boxing, because you start to groom a new star. And this is the first time in boxing history, as I've stated many times, that we don't have a legit superstar in America. We don't. You know, people can say Tank, people can say Errol Spence. These guys aren't legitimate.
We don't have it.
We have to get a legitimate American superstar. And the only way we can do that is if the baton is handed. This is the best opportunity for it. So it would be actually probably better for boxing. But I just don't know if he's that guy. I don't know if he's that dude. I don't.
Now, I didn't expect, and I don't expect, the 67 to come back at the top level. And if you look at history, even Pacquiao, when his level of opposition got better, his volume dropped as well. You know, so it's normal. I do agree with you though. 46 is not something that you want to bring to the ring consistently. I think the sweet spot would be around 54, like he threw against Durrell. Like he threw 54 punches around against Durrell, who was a decent opponent, a good opponent, but
to his credit, by the way, not to cut you off, but that's the credit that you give Benavidez, right? Is he showed a little more. When I talked about the fight last week, I said if this fight's in the lower 50s as far as output for Bivol, Plant's got a really good shot. And this was in the mid 40s, and Benavidez still won. So that's credit to Benavidez that he can do other things, right?
Right. That's what I was trying to tell you. Like, this guy can box a little bit. He's not just this mindless zombie that comes forward and just like people compare him to Margarito. No disrespect to Margarito, but he's not Margarito. So one thing that glared out at me though when I was kind of looking at the numbers, right, is he threw 54 against Durrell, but he landed the same amount of punches as when he threw 46. So he threw less punches in this fight, but his connect percentage was still high. And even with that 54, he was, and even though he landed 18 per round, he was still able to get Durrell out of there. So again, he's 25 years old. He showed some different wrinkles in this fight. I think he'll continue to improve. I think in a year, this fight becomes real interesting, Calix. Maybe
I don't want to lose my train of thought.
I
don't lose my train of thought because you brought out something good. A lot of times it's not better to be versatile, though. Sometimes it's better to be the specialist. And what I mean by that is I don't want to see versatility. It's good to see, but I don't think versatility is going to help Benavidez against Canelo. You know, possibly against other fighters, like I said, Charlo, you know, somebody like that, Boo Boo. It could help. But I wanted to see a dude who looked special at what he does best. You know, and you don't have to be a great defensive fighter if you're a great, like, special pressure fighter, right? I wanted to see a dude who, even though he's fighting Caleb Plant in a 22-foot ring with Kenny Bayless there, he's still throwing 60-plus punches per round and landing at a high percentage. And then it's game on. Like, then it's like, whoa, I thought 60-40 Canelo. Now I'm thinking 70-30 Benavidez. That's what I wanted. And I bet against that. And I would have gladly lost, because when you have plus 450 odds, Beeb, you know, I'm just throwing a little bit down. I threw $20. I'm not worried about losing that $20. I want to see the knockout. And he just didn't do it. And that was the frustrating part for me is I almost get like, at this point, I'm getting a little older and grumpier. I almost get like offended when people try to package me something that is not true. It happened almost a decade ago when these dudes were trying to sell me that Adrian Broner was the pound for pound king and he's going to be the next Floyd Mayweather, especially when Bud Crawford's sitting there in the same division and you're watching him come up. Just package me a fun, exciting fighter. That's all I need. Like, I don't. Benavidez could go on a run where he doesn't even have to do it successively back to back. He could go on a run where he fights 4 tough fights out of 8 in the next 2 or 3 years, and he can split that in half, or he can win 5 out of the 8. And I'm a fan. I just want to see dudes fight, and I want to see them packaged correctly. And I just want to see fights at the end of the day, because the great fights bring on the great fighters. So the more you take fights off of theory, off of paper, and bring them into reality, you accidentally build stars too, right? You've seen that. I tell a story all the time. I went to Vegas for Mayweather versus Cotto. And I'm in the lobby bar. Yeah, it was Mayweather versus Cotto.
Oh, that's when you took the picture with Cotto, right? You had the picture with Cotto that time?
No. That was at the last fight. That was at the Golovkin fight. But I took the picture with Roger Mayweather. I'm standing there with Roger Mayweather, and they're joking. They're giving me a good ribbon because I got the Cotto shirt on. And I look out, and it's Omar Henry, rest in peace, standing next to Danny Garcia. And everybody, I swear, everybody is walking up to Omar Henry and looking for pictures and autographs. And Danny Garcia is just standing there. Remember, like it was yesterday, in his Puerto Rican tank top, and nobody's taking pictures with him. They're going to Omar Henry. So what happens? A couple months after that, Beeb, what happens? He knocks out Amir Khan. He was a huge underdog, like 8-1. He knocks him out. He wasn't supposed to. And then what's he do again the next year? I'm at Mayweather versus Canelo. He's on the undercard. I bet him as a 3-1 underdog, and he beats the hell out of Lucas Matisse. And guess what happens? He's an underdog back-to-back. They accidentally build Danny Garcia into a PBC star, right? They roll it out. They run the PBC around Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman. And that's what happens when you can accidentally build guys just by putting on fights. And that's all I want to see. Benavidez doesn't have to be Canelo. He doesn't have to be. Just stop selling me stuff that isn't the truth. I think we're so thirsty and hungry for an American star, American boogeyman, that we're just going to try to manufacture and create one out of thin air. I feel like people went into a lab and tried to build this Mexican Frankenstein, right? And what I saw was this Mexican Frankenstein walking around the ring in the first 6 rounds and just malfunctioning. That's what I saw against Caleb Plant. I saw a good fighter. I did not see a monster. It's just me.
Now, you were being sold that 67 punch per round, that aggressive guy, and the public was too, right? A lot of people were expecting that. But again, like I was explaining Thursday, I knew that that's a component to what this guy is, but I also knew there was much more. And I also knew that 67 is not going to hold up for the rest of his career as he moves up in competition. But you're correct. I mean, 46 was a significant drop. You would expect, maybe in the Durrell fight, 54 punches per round, whatever. But again, like, I hate to beat a dead horse, but he still was landing 18 punches around, in both situations. So here's where I do like the versatility, because when you run into that guy like Tyson, for instance, he was great at what he did, but because of his frame and his physical attributes, he could only be that one guy. He couldn't be anything else, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Benavidez has the structure to be many things, right? That's why I love a tall guy that can fight on the inside, like Fury. I love seeing that. Bo, I love that, because most people don't expect that when they see a tall, lanky guy. They're expecting to be in a long distance fight, and when they're being beat, like Sebastian Fundora is another example of that, right?
Paul Williams.
Yeah, when you get that, so there's gonna be times like where you can't be the Mexican monster, and then how do you win, right? Mm-hmm. Like Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, right? He was supposed to be that monster with the right hand, but he ended up turning into the boxer in that fight, and Ray Leonard ended up turning into the stalker, right? So I like being thrown those curveballs. I've always been like the guy that likes the guy that can do multiple things. I love the guy that in basketball, I love the guy that can score the triple double. Like, I love the guy that can play both ends of the court. You know what I mean? Okay, you have a guy that's a dynamic scorer. That's great. Yeah, I love it. But I guess it's a preference thing. I understand that. You were told something, or you were being led that something was supposed to be a certain way.
I don't like false advertisement.
Yeah, and it wasn't what you were being told it was. But in my opinion, just because it wasn't what you were told it was going to be, doesn't mean what you got was really all that bad. You see what I'm saying? So
it wasn't all that bad. It was good.
So what I'm trying to tell you is,
I don't want to see good, though.
Would your opinion have been different if this guy wasn't labeled the Mexican monster?
Yes.
And so much pressure wasn't put on him. He put the pressure on himself. He even said himself out of his own mouth, it's a disappointment if I don't knock this guy out.
This is what I'm saying, though. There's a reason that they're building these fighters up around 168 is Canelo has broken people's brains. He's broken their brains. Like, they have to create these false narratives in order to have people constantly chasing their tails. They can't be honest. They're doing it with Morrell Jr. They've been doing it. The guy's got 8 fights, and they're building up Morrell Jr. and then putting a microphone in front of Morrell Jr.'s face and saying, what about Canelo? Yeah, Canelo's ducking me. And they're like, oh, yeah, he's another fighter Canelo's ducking. And they've created a monster with Morrell Jr. that now the WBO mentions Morrell Jr. And then the Benavidez fans, the extremists, have a hissy fit about that. It's like, well, why are you trying to put another obstacle in his way? It's like, I'm not, by the way, because my expectations are not that high. Once again, I wanted Benavidez to do the bare minimum in order to get the Canelo shot. He's done that. I'm fine. I'm sold. I'm sold on the fight. I love the fight. Right. So I don't expect Benavidez to fight another tough fight before Canelo. I don't. I expect him to fight number 87 in box rec. Or if that's too much
Really?
to ask, number 587 in box rec.
I
I
think he
don't
fights
expect
Morrell
it.
next, Calix. I think he will fight that Morrell fight next. I
There's no
do.
way. No way.
I
No,
do.
there's no way.
Really?
Al finally has his an organic rival to Canelo. He's got it now. There's no way he's putting that in danger. It's not happening. And then he's going to try to roll out his best offer to Canelo and try to get him into a multi-fight deal again like he did against Caleb Plant. And that's going to become a battle because you're going to start to hear more narratives. It's, we fought Caleb Plant on Showtime. Why doesn't he do it again? And of course, stupid. Benavidez doesn't have the belt. That's why. But when you're the cash cow, and I hear it with Tank all the time, it's the reason the fight's at 136. There's a reason there's a 10-pound clause. There's a reason that not only the first fight, but the second fight will be on Showtime if there's a second fight. You're the cash cow. You can make the demands. But apparently with some people, that doesn't apply to Canelo. So I don't know. It just seems like the goalposts are always moving. But let me ask you this. Like, who do you think Benavidez fights next, and who would be acceptable to you? Because it's not going to be the Canelo fight. Realistically, people need to wrap their head around it.
It can't be the Canelo fight.
It's Ryder and it's Bivol this year. People need to wrap their heads around that. All right, so we're looking at February 2024, May at the latest. That's what we're looking at, and it's going to happen. So, Benavidez needs to fight another fight this year.
He needs one more. He needs one more this year, but he's going to have to take another one next year too, right? Because he's not going to get. You think he gets Canelo beginning of next year?
Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
Because even people like me, if Canelo were to go to, the expectations are higher, right? So Ryder, Bivol, I'm expecting and he can take a break after Bivol, right?
Yeah,
he can take a break. But even if he wants to if they agree to a May fight, if he wants to do Berlanga in February or something like that, so maybe right. If they nail down that we want to do this Cinco de Mayo, maybe Canelo decides, let me do a Berlanga tune-up, right? If we're putting that in proper perspective. But to me, February or May, that fight's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
So you don't think it's Morrell?
No, they're not going to put Benavidez in danger. And to me, once again, I don't need him to fight Morrell. I don't need him to do these things because I'm not expecting great things. I asked Benavidez to get one fight. Beat one top 5 guy, whoever it is. Pick Caleb Plant, pick John Ryder, pick Morrell Jr., pick a guy, fight him, and then that'll be your bare minimum to earn the Canelo fight, right? And he's got it now. So they're not going to put him in any danger because the demand is there now. It's organic, real demand, and it's arguably the biggest fight that could be made in boxing right now, right? As far as money goes, right? So if I was expecting great things of David Benavidez, which I'm not, to me, Morrell Jr. is like, he's got 8 fights, right? To me, this should be like, it's Morrell Jr. Like, it's something that should happen, right? It shouldn't be it shouldn't be too much to ask. And I'm not the one who asked it. The WBO did. They're saying he's got a Reggie. You know, he's at the top of the rankings, fight each other, get to Canelo. I'm not the one who threw that out there. I forgot Morrell Jr. existed. PBC forgets Morrell Jr. existed because the PBC didn't put his last fight on their own schedule, on their own website, so 4 days before the fight.
Crazy.
So what I'm telling you is I don't expect great things from Benavidez anyway at this point. I think he's a good fighter. I'm expecting the bare minimum. He's got the Canelo fight. He's done that bare minimum for it. And I just think they're going to throw him in there with whoever in September. Keep it moving, Arizona fight, and then he's got the Canelo fight. I think that's what they're going to do. So
what I think is going to happen is I think Charlo and Andre are going to fight at 168. I think Jamal is going to move up to 168. And I think they're going to fight.
So, and by the way, Charlo said over the weekend, he said on Thursday and Friday, he wants Benavidez next. That's what he said.
Really? So could it be Charlo next for Benavidez, and would that be a bad move?
No, because I think Benavidez knocks out Charlo. I do.
Okay.
I think that's a great stylistic matchup.
All right, so it's not Morrell. It's not Morrell.
No.
Could it could be Charlo then? Or would Andre make sense, or is that a bad move, you think? I think he beats Andre too, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I would pick him against Andre too.
So you would pick David.
I don't think much of Andre. I don't think much of Charlo. I just don't. Jamel, yes. Jamal, no. He hasn't. He hasn't. We're talking about a guy who hasn't fought in 650 days.
So here's the thing, because this is a very interesting. This is a very interesting question I'm going to ask you. Would you pick David Benavidez over every other super middleweight in the world right now except Canelo Alvarez? Is there any super middleweight you think that could beat David Benavidez outside of Canelo Alvarez?
To me is the clear two.
He's clear two. Undisputable two.
And that's the frustrating part about this, Beeb, is I say the same thing with Tank. Unleash these guys. Unleash them. There's no reason not to. And people like me are forgiving. That's the part that's messed up about this is, people are thinking that we're demanding too much. We're not. We just want fighters to behave like fighters. We're not saying like we're going to show up and watch gladiators at the Roman Coliseum. It's just behave like fighters. So I don't like when I see Benavidez clearly held back, clearly not being promoted correctly throughout his career. Same thing with Tank. And you can point out, Tank's doing this here, this there. I understand that, but he'd be even bigger. Tank versus Ryan should be even bigger than it is. Benavidez should be bigger than he is. And if you just unleash this dude, he could beat Morrell Jr. in the same year he beats a Charlo. Then he'll beat a Bubu Andre. Then he'll go on that run. I'd pick him over everybody at 168 and everybody moving up from 160. Munguia moves up, he beats him. Golovkin at this point in his career, he beats him. So why not do this stuff? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Canelo versus Benavidez would be even bigger, an even bigger fight. And then we'd be talking about Canelo handing the baton to Benavidez. But instead we have bubble wrap protecting these guys for no reason. There's no reason to be protecting Benavidez in any way. And this is a good start. Caleb Plant is a good start. But I just don't, based off the track record, I don't think that these guys are going to take the ball and just run with it for a 3, 4, 5 year sustained period and just go out there and do great things. That's why I'm not getting my hopes up. I'm just not. I'm very tempered on what I saw Saturday night. I saw a good fighter, and I'm not sure I'm seeing a guy who's going to go on this great run because the track record doesn't tell me that that's going to happen.
Is it because is it because of PBC, or you don't think this guy can kind of break the mold? You don't think he's gonna want to? You don't think after this he's got some confidence? You don't have after this he's gonna say, I don't know, man. I kind of think David Benavidez does want the smoke, bro. I don't know, man.
I do too. That's the thing. This is an important question that needs to be asked to you, to the chat, and it becomes very murky. Do you believe the narrative that it's the power brokers that are holding back these fighters and the fighters actually want the fights? Or is it the fighters are very happy sitting back with their guaranteed minimums, fighting once per year, and just having 44 weeks of PTO every year and just reaping it, just taking in the rewards? What's the answer there? Because I see Stephen Fulton Jr. going to Japan, and I say, that's a dude taking control of his career. When Benavidez and Caleb Plant fought each other, do you think Al wanted to put on that fight? I think he went kicking and dragging, but Benavidez and Plant took control of their career, right? And they said, we want this fight. That's what I want to see from these fighters. I want Benavidez to come out and say, I want this fight, that fight, that fight. And it's easier to make bigger fights if you take control of your career, because what he just signed an extension with PBC, right? Earlier in the year. He could have
Oh, I
made
didn't
the
know that. I didn't know that. Did he
one on the
really?
Boxing Voice. I think he signed an
Oh,
extension
okay.
and announced it
Okay.
on the
Yeah.
Boxing Voice
I
earlier
didn't know
this year.
that.
So these
Okay.
guys are last year. These guys can make it easier for themselves if they do things business wise and take control of their career. But I want to see that from Benavidez. I want to see him take control of their career. And to your point, I can say he's just a good fighter. But you asked me that question, and I think about it. I see him beating everybody else at 168 and everybody moving up from 160. Dude, so he's the clear cut number 2 to me. He's the clear cut number 2. Just beating Plant, I believe that. Just off the eye test.
So
I think he would beat. I think he'd beat John Ryder. I think he would.
So would it be safe to say that based on his peers, he's a great fighter, but he's not an exceptional elite fighter like Canelo? Would that be a better way to categorize it?
I don't think there are. We've both been around for longer, so our definition of great and special and good would be different than a lot of New Age fans, right? So the New Age fans might see Benavidez fight and beat Plant and say he's great. My bar is higher. I don't know. I don't know if there's a great fighter out there. Canelo's greatest victory to me is winning the trilogy against Golovkin. No matter how you had those fights scored, he won 2 and draw 1. And those are legacy defining wins, right? So in order to have that great rivalry, you need 2 great fighters. And I'm not sure Benavidez is there. And I think that Canelo views things as far as legacy. So I think that's why he's fighting Bivol instead of Benavidez, even though Benavidez is the easier fight for more money. He views Bivol now as a real rival. He beat me. I can't let that happen. I got to come out on the top of this. And I think that's why he's going to fight Bivol instead of Benavidez. Yeah, and that'll be held against him by a lot of American boxing fans who just anything that's outside of those American borders is foreign to them, right?
Yeah.
I remember last year when dudes were saying that he was ducking Spence at 164 and Charlo coming up from 160 in order to fight Bivol. I mean, just imagine how dumb that is in hindsight. But that's a lot of American boxing fans, unfortunately. But
that deal was so crazy because you didn't have David Benavidez or Caleb Plant in that deal at the time. And you had guys that weren't even in his division. You were proposing guys that weren't even in his division to fight him. And
to me, that shows how much he'd rather work with Eddie than Al, right?
Well, and also he those fights weren't appealing to him because he's saying that these guys aren't even in my weight class. These guys aren't going to get me undisputed, right? Mm-hmm. So, do you think that fight with Bivol is going to be at 175 or 168? Because a lot of people are saying it's going to be at 168 now. That's the rumor. I don't know how true that is, though.
Last I heard, it was 75. And that's another narrative that needs to be blown up is the reason 168 came about is Bivol. You remember how dismissive? It was almost like it made me like Bivol even more. After he beats Canelo, he was dismissive of it, right? He was like, he's at 168. He's coming up, he doesn't have any belts up here. I'd rather fight for be it for undisputed. Remember when he was saying that stuff? And it almost made me like him more because he's valuing undisputed and the trophies and the belts and the stuff that's valuable instead of the big fight. But the reason 168 came about is Canelo heard that, and Canelo's like, well, in order to entice him to a second fight, I'll put all my belts at 168 up, and he can become undisputed at 168 if he wants to be undisputed. That's how that came about.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
That narrative flipped to we want to weight drain him. So now it flipped back to 175. I think that fight's going to be at 175.
Yeah, I think it's 175 too.
I really don't know what Benavidez is going to do later this year. I don't. I just want to see him. I just want to see him. I can't stand once per year fighting. Can't stand it.
No, it's aggravating. At least give us 2. I mean, I know it's when the competition gets better and stuff, you can't fight 3 or 4 times a year. I understand that. Maybe 3, but 4 is a stretch, but at least give us 2. That once a year shit is brutal, man.
Eight
That's
to eight
aggravating.
to 12 week training camps fighting once per year. These dudes are
Yeah,
overtraining, underfighting. They're killing each other in camp.
yeah,
And it's not.
it's
If it
crazy.
was better for fighter safety, they wouldn't be getting injured and pulling out of fights as much. I don't know. I don't like it.
So, what's the timeline for Canelo Benavidez in your opinion? Do you think 2024 spring, or what do you think?
February or May. I think that's February would be right in the wheelhouse. May at the very latest. May at the latest. That's the timeline to me.
That's going to be Canelo's first year of 2000. Excuse me, first fight of 2024. In your
It
opinion,
could be the reason to me that Berlanga. And by the way, Canelo, he hasn't said he would fight Berlanga. That's Eddie Hearn trying to lure Berlanga over there, and Mexico versus Puerto Rico, right?
yeah.
But the reason that Berlanga is out there, in my opinion, is Berlanga is a good tune-up, right? Because none of us view Berlanga as anything of value at 168. So it's a perfect tune-up for a Benavidez fight. So I could see possibly Berlanga in February and then Benavidez in May, but May at the latest. That's the beautiful thing about this is as long as negotiations play out fair, Canelo has a track record of making the fights. That's the beautiful thing about this. You're going to get the fight. We are going to get Canelo versus Benavidez. We are going to get it.
100%.
Even if Canelo gets destroyed by Bivol, which is very possible. That's very possible. I don't agree. Like, I don't know what you think about this. D-Style, I think we've talked about this. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he likes Canelo's chances for the second Bivol.
Yeah, he does. He does.
I do not.
He does.
I do not. Do you think he has a shot?
Guy, can I tell you the truth?
Go.
I think he does because I went back and watched that other fight, and I'm saying to myself, yeah, I mean he lost, but was it I don't know, was it really that bad? Like I could see a path to victory for him, and I'm gonna cut him some slack. Everyone thinks I'm a Canelo hater. He may not have been 100% going into that fight because he's the type of guy that carries nagging injuries with him. Like it took him a while to get that knee surgery. It took him a while to get that wrist surgery. He needed some time off. He was on a very busy schedule, right? And this is why he's saying to himself, okay, I'm going to take this Ryder fight right now because, I don't want to call Ryder a tune-up, but I need a little bit of a softer touch, right? And let my body heal up. So, and maybe he did underestimate Bivol a little bit. So now he's going to be a little bit more focused, right? He's not going to underestimate him because again, he was a 5-1 favorite going in that fight. Everyone was telling him it was a foregone conclusion he was going to win it. So now he had the wrist surgery, and he's had a little rest, got a victory under his belt. I don't think it's impossible that he beats Bivol. I may bet him to beat Bivol, to be honest with you.
You know why I won't, and why I would pick Bivol 9 out of 10 times is I'm in Vegas for the Canelo Triple G fight, and I was talking to Steve Kim at the bar, and we were talking about this. He said he was in Bivol's camp before they fought Canelo, and he said as the camp goes on, he's like, they could not believe that Canelo was about to fight this fight. They could not believe. This is Bivol in his camp. They could not believe that Canelo actually agreed to fight them. And he's like, we are going to concede to everything. They'll ask for gloves. We'll concede to it. We will concede to everything to make sure that this fight goes through because they could not believe that Canelo was taking the challenge of fighting Bivol. And what happened? I had Bivol winning 9 rounds. And
I had him winning 9 rounds.
I don't think that changes. Whatever adjustment Canelo makes, Bivol is going to make one right behind it. Some guys, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And this is what I'm saying is the reason that Canelo has the fan base that he has, and new age boxing fans are confused by this. They don't understand it. I've tried to explain it to them. Is they're all about protecting the O. They think that anybody who loses is trash, garbage, and is exposed. And they can't understand how it is that a guy loses to a Bivol, loses to a Mayweather 11 years ago, and he's still got the fan base that he has. It's easy. Is you build up an organic fan base, You widen it throughout time by behaving a certain way, and then you stay true to yourself. The media cannot break what they didn't build. You can only break what's manufactured. So he built up this fan base by being him, and he can only break himself from that fan base by not behaving like Canelo Alvarez. And win or lose, he's going to continue to behave like Canelo Alvarez. He's going to take on tough challenges, despite what people say. He's going to ride his white horse on the beach. He's going to kick boy bands out of Sweet 16s. He's going to curse out soccer players, and he's going to continue to move on this way. And that's why he's endearing to the fan base. As long as he behaves the same way, he's going to keep his fan. He's not worried. If he loses the B-Ball, guess what? Benavidez fight's still as big as it was before. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Shout out to D-Style Boxing. It says PBC or DAZN, where does Canelo versus Benavidez happen? That's a tough one, man.
What do you think?
Wow. You know what I think they'll do? They'll do the same thing they did with Ryan Tank. I think they're going to do that moving forward. Because correct me if I'm wrong. Did DAZN have pay-per-view back then when Plant and Canelo fought, or not? I can't remember.
No, they didn't. You're right.
So now that they have pay-per-view,
because Billy Joe was on regular DAZN.
So I think they'll have it on. I think they'll do the same thing they did with Ryan, and what they're doing with Ryan and Tank. So PBC will try and play hardball and get Canelo back, in my opinion. Yeah, it's possible. But like I said,
that negotiating tool, right? That they tried to dangle that belt.
Here's the thing: now that DAZN has pay-per-view, it's not like, oh, we're just an app anymore. I think PBC and Showtime will look at it differently now. Okay, we'll just let them sell the pay-per-view too, right?
I have two answers to that question. One, and I know y'all would agree with this, is as long as they get it done, who cares? Because the pay-per-view price, I mean, it's the same either way anyway. But my second answer to that would be, if I'm honestly answering it, is I really think he's going to try to flex his muscles this time because he really likes dealing with Eddie and DAZN for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason is, but he's got a good relationship with them. He'd rather be dealing with them because he turned down an easier deal with the PBC deal to go with the DAZN deal last year.
More money too.
And even if Al throws out a bunch of money from the rumblings, how much do you get upfront guaranteed? How much of that comes in installments over years? You got to throw that in there as well.
Well, here's the thing. They're doing a co-promotion right now with Tank and Ryan. Golden Boy and PBC are working together. I think, here's the dynamic here because PBC hates Eddie. That's the thing. But maybe they can kiss and make up for this one, because PBC has done co-promotions in the past. Maybe they can make up for this one. Maybe they can bury the hatchet with Eddie. But I do know they don't like Eddie. I know him and Steven.
What do you think about the $84.99 price point on Tank versus Ryan?
I'm a loser. I'm gonna buy it anyways, man. This is
I'm the wrong.
I think it's gonna end up being a problem. I think it's gonna backfire on them, and I think it could hurt the paper. I think they're getting a little overzealous with this, thinking that this is gonna go crazy. I'm hoping this does a ton of pay-per-view buys, but I'm not sure, man. I think this could hurt the buys because I don't know. I think we both talked about this, and maybe I'm wrong, but when we look at the fan base of these two fighters, they're younger, right? Are they buying pay-per-views? Can they even afford this price point? Is it smart knowing the demographic that you're marketing this fight to? Is it smart to raise the price, right?
Or are they raising the price because they're expecting less buys, so they're trying to cancel that out? That could be it as well. Who knows? But I just don't like that this keeps and look, I'm like you, I'm gonna buy it regardless. And I don't like that when I complain about this stuff, that other boxing fans get mad at me for complaining about this stuff because this is something that should be universal. We should not be accepting towards $85 pay-per-views for a fight like this, or pay-per-views every other week, like we're going to get in the spring.
How can me or anybody else criticize you for being concerned how you spend your money? That's you don't you have every right to be critical of paying for something if you want to be,
as a consumer. But the
Of
stuff that I
course,
get back is I'm a hater generally, and it's generally from PBC fans because they see that they have to put on more pay-per-views at this point to make the
yeah,
numbers work, right?
yeah.
So a lot of it comes from that, uh, but that's what it is. But you're not anti-fighter for saying stuff like that. I want the sustainability of the sport. Rising tide lifts all ships. So I want everybody to do good. And the way to do that is just put on more accessible fights, more good fights. And on top of that, you don't make this a country club sport. Boxing is not supposed to be a country club sport. It's just not.
No, not really.
It's supposed to be accessible.
Yeah, I bought the Benavidez plan. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that was probably the best pay-per-view I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years.
That's a good pay-per-view. That was
a real good. I had no qualms with this pay-per-view. I was entertained from start to finish. I thought it was a great show. Well, I think we pretty much covered it all, man. I mean, one last quick one before we head out is this Ben Eubank thing done? I'm hearing this Ben Eubank thing is done.
I hope so. I hope so.
Do you?
Yeah, because it's confusing to me. Once again, is another thing I'm confused by is I've seen dudes who have done what Conor Ben has been accused of doing.
Yeah, they're going over the top with this PED shit. I do.
So I'm confused as to why they picked Conor Ben to be the one to try to nail.
He's a scapegoat. He's a scapegoat, right, Calix, for some reason?
Right. He's become the scapegoat for the PED user in boxing. We know guys are swerving around, and we got a guy in Memo Heredia who has already been nailed for similar things, who's working openly in Benavidez's camp, and everybody's acting like this dude is a saint now, like he had a Saul Tarsus Damascus Road change of heart, and all of a sudden he's for the clean sport, and he's just on the up and up now. So the constant virtue signaling when it fits whatever agenda people are trying to move. The constant uneven takes that I see. I don't understand why Conor Ben has become the one that everybody wants to suspend for 5 years and never see fight again, when dudes are out there fighting right now who have been in the same situation, and guys are in the Hall of Fame who have been in the same situation and done the same things. And we know guys are openly using. So this has been my take on it in order to stay consistent for the past decade. And people know this from me by now, is I've become agnostic on it. I've become libertarian on it. It is what it is at this point. We're never going to get a hold of it. We're just not. People can act like we can. VADA testing is not going to get a hold of it. VADA, WADA, NADA, USADA, it doesn't matter. The mad scientists are always ahead of it. They're always ahead of the drug testing. And when these guys get caught, they're just going to say eggs, tea, tainted meat, whatever it is. They're going to come up with something, and all's going to be forgiven. So why am I going to sit here and get worked up over it?
That's funny, man.
Get Conor Ben in there. I want to see Conor Ben all juiced up fight Eubank Jr. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's have at it.
I'm kind of getting excited for the fight a little bit now too. That's going to be,
you know
what's going to be funny. Like how can Chris Eubank Jr. be cocky now that he got stopped? Like he can't be that guy.
But he probably, the beautiful thing about it.
He'll probably find a way to spin it. He's a smart guy, huh?
He will be. He will be.
Crazy.
Both of those guys are polarizing. That's going to be a beautiful fight.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. This was fun.
Appreciate you anytime.
We'll do more in the future, man.
Yep.
Thank you so much, brother. All right. Be good.